Max Singer, thanks for offering an interview to VOA Persian today.
Happy to be with you.
So I'd like to start with the Iran nuclear deal. What does Israel think of President Trump's latest decision to continue waiving energy sanctions against Iran for one more 4-month period unless certain conditions are met?
I don't want to try to speak for the Israeli government, and also that's sort of a diplomatic timing detail. That the real questions are, how does the United States and Israel work to prevent Iran from getting nuclear weapons? I don't think whether you keep the deal or don't keep the deal, it has much to do with it. The deal was essentially a postponement, and it didn't address the long-term questions, except that it included the Iranian denial that they had nuclear weapons or were trying to get nuclear weapons. So anything that the United States and the rest of the world wants to do to stop Iran is consistent with the deal.
What do you think the United States and Israel are actually going to do to achieve that eventual goal of preventing Iran from ever getting nuclear weapons?
Well, I think there'll be considerations of military possibilities. I think the idea that a military action would have to destroy all the network of facilities to be effective is wrong. I think that even if it put out of action some portion for a year or 2 years, that would have a big effect because you could do it again, or they might be afraid you'd do it again, or it might change the internal situation. So military action, I think, will still be a possibility and could make a big difference. And the second thing is the implications of the mini uprising or almost uprising that took place in Iran, which I think taught everybody, that is both the Iranian government and the outside world, about the breadth of support, breadth of opposition to the government and to the regime. And I think that understanding is affecting things now and will in the future. Where it will go, it can't take for sure, but it seems to me that encouraging that kind of thing within appropriate limits ought to be part of both the U.S. and Israeli policy.
And what do you think that more active U.S.-Israeli support for opposition protests, activists in Iran, what do you think that could, what do you think the impact could be on the nuclear deal?
Well, if the regime is changed, the whole question of the deal goes away. First of all, we have to see whether the new regime, which would, I think, be very much opposed to the current religious regime, how they might decide to go ahead with nuclear weapons program. I think probably on a much slower basis, and also they would be much less dangerous because the current regime is actively supporting terrorists now, and a regime which very much stayed away from terrorists and wasn't revolutionary in the world would be a very different thing. I mean, Pakistan would be certainly more dangerous than that.
You talked a moment ago about how you believe that military action, even if it doesn't take out all of the Iranian program, could still be effective. How much appetite do you think there is in Israel and in the United States for such action?
Zero. Nobody wants to do it. But on the other hand, nobody wants the revolutionary regime in Iran to have nuclear weapons. So it would only be done at a very last chance basis. And what happens with North Korea may play on people's understandings and expectations in Iran.
Can I just follow up on that point about North Korea? How do you think the North Korean nuclear program and its wave of missile tests and nuclear tests is affecting the Iranian situation?
I don't know, that's too complicated. They interact in many ways, and I don't think there's any single direct relationship. It's clear that the North Koreans are helping the Iranians, and the Iranians are helping the North Koreans, and that indicates that they both are are interested in spreading nuclear weapons around the world as getting them themselves, and certainly are not resisting such a spread of nuclear weapons.
In terms of U.S. and Israeli policy on Iran going forward, what differences do you see in the approaches of the two administrations, the Trump administration and the Netanyahu administration?
I don't know. I can't tell. I think probably the differences are not about direction or values, but about how to proceed tactically.
Maybe we can move on to some other topics. In a recent piece, you wrote about what you think are the prospects for an Israeli-Palestinian peace deal going forward, and actually you wrote that you don't see such a possibility and that you think the status quo will remain for some time. Why do you have such a pessimistic view about the prospects for a deal?
Because I think that the occupation is the Palestinians' best weapon against Israel, and they're not prepared to give up that weapon, that status of being occupied. According to them, it's questionable whether it's real occupation. But they're not willing to give up that status and that political claim unless Israel is willing to let them put in millions of refugees and destroy Israel as a democratic Jewish state. So that's their position. They prefer occupation to peace. And so Israel has no choice about it.
Well, the Palestinian president officially has said for years that they just want to return to the 1967 lines with East Jerusalem as their capital, that being their goal. How would you respond to that official position of theirs, that this is what they want, rather than just wanting endless occupation, as you argue?
Well, the key thing is the refugees. They demonstrate by refusing to let the refugees live normal lives and keeping them in theoretical refugee status. And if they're willing to make a settlement, they can show it by providing a humanitarian solution for the refugees. But they haven't done that. They're keeping alive their claims that all these people have a right to go to Israel, not go back, because almost all of them have never been there. They have a right to go to Israel, and that right would be deadly for Israel. So they're not interested in making peace with an Israel that survives.
If I could just finish up with the Jerusalem issue. The United States has recently declared that Jerusalem is the capital of Israel and begun the process of moving the U.S. Embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. There was a negative reaction in the region to Trump's decision on Jerusalem with the Arab protests, and Iran also made some very critical statements about the move. What do you think of those reactions from the Arab world and from Iran?
Well, it's to cater to the Arab world that the U.S. has in the past not recognized Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. That was part of the diplomatic convenience policy that I talked about. And Trump is now starting a policy of truth, recognizing the reality. The other countries didn't want to do that. They liked the old policy. Trump is, I think, going to force them to gradually move to recognize the truth and thinking about the Middle East.
How worried do you think Israel is about some of these very critical reactions from the neighborhood to the Jerusalem move?
Well, I think Israel would like it if people were more realistic and understanding, but I think we've gotten used to the diplomatic environment, which is very anti-Israel and very unrealistic. So we don't like it, but we can't decide how the rest of the world is going to act.
Well, Max Singer, thank you very much for speaking to VOA Persian.
Yeah, happy to talk to you.